Barron Trump stood silently at the edge of the ballroom, watching as the glittering lights of the Liberty Gala bounced off the polished floors. Celebrities, politicians, and power brokers crowded around him, laughing, posing, pretending. But Barron wasn't interested in the spectacle. It wasn't just the glittering chandeliers or the laughter that echoed through the grand hall that had him restless. It was a question. A question that had been haunting him for weeks. What does it mean to be American if you haven't fought for it? His thoughts were interrupted by a figure in a midnight blue gown, moving through the crowd with an energy that demanded attention. Angelina Jolie. To most, she was an actress, a former UN ambassador, a global figure with a storied career. But to Barron, in that moment, she was something else. Someone who might understand the very question that had been consuming him. Later that evening, after the auction and the speeches had come and gone, Barron found himself alone on the terrace behind the hall. The dim glow of antique lanterns flickered softly in the chilly October night, and the distant sounds of laughter and music from the gala seemed far removed from the space he now occupied. He didn't hear her footsteps, but he sensed her presence before she spoke. "You look like you needed an escape," Angelina said, stepping beside him. Her arms were crossed gently, her eyes fixed on the distant Washington skyline, a picture of calm amidst the noise. "I didn't expect you to be here tonight," Barron replied, his voice steady, but tinged with something deeper, something that betrayed a mind older than his years. "I come when I think the money might actually do some good," she answered, her voice soft but firm. The night air was cool, a refreshing contrast to the warmth inside the ballroom, but there was a comfortable tension in the silence that hung between them. "Can I ask you something?" Barron finally said, turning slightly to face her, his gaze fixed on her with a question that had been simmering inside him for years. "Of course," Angelina replied, her brow lifting slightly, intrigued by the depth of his voice. "Do you think the American dream still exists?" Barron asked, his tone neither confrontational nor rhetorical. It was a genuine, almost childlike search for something he hadn't quite figured out yet. Angelina looked at him, her gaze steady and unflinching, as if weighing whether he truly wanted the answer. Her lips quirked into a faint, almost sad smile, not dismissive, but with the sorrow of someone who had been asked this question too many times by people who didn't really want to know the truth. "I think it exists," she said slowly, the words coming carefully. "But not for everyone, and not in the way people think it does." Barron didn't break eye contact, his hands now buried deep in his pockets. "Who does it belong to then?" he asked, the question coming not from a place of challenge, but from a genuine curiosity, a hunger for understanding. "To those who don't inherit it," Angelina answered after a breath, her voice low but resolute. "To those who fight for it, to those who believe in it, even when the country tells them not to. Immigrants, refugees, single mothers, kids from broken schools, people without a last name like yours," she added, her words gentle but clear. Barron's expression faltered, the weight of her words settling in. "I thought it was meant for everyone," he said, his voice soft, almost as if he were speaking aloud the quiet realization that had been growing inside him. "So did I," Angelina replied, "until I met people who had to bleed just to be considered American." For a moment, the noise of the city below filled the silence between them. The sounds of life and laughter from the party inside, the hum of the streets far below, were just background noise now fading, distant. Barron exhaled slowly, as if the air itself had become heavier with every word exchanged. "I've never lived outside of wealth," he admitted, the honesty in his voice disarming. "But I'm not blind." "I don't think you are," Angelina said quietly. "That's why I'm still standing here." The chill deepened, but neither of them moved. The wind carried with it the weight of everything that had been said, everything still left unsaid. Barron's voice lowered, almost a whisper now. "What if I told you I didn't ask that question as a political statement, but because I don't know what it means to be American anymore?" Angelina turned toward him, her expression softening. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand the unspoken turmoil beneath his words. "Then maybe," she said, her voice quieter now, "you're finally starting to become one." In that instant, the world outside the terrace seemed to fall away. The son of a president, raised in marble towers, and the voice of the voiceless stood side by side, not as opposites, but as two people standing on the edge of a question far too big for the room they had just left. The terrace had grown quieter. Inside, the gala was still roaring with applause for some donor who had just pledged $500,000 to a cause he probably didn't fully understand. But Barron and Angelina stayed outside, drawn not by the cold, but by the warmth of a conversation neither had expected. "You know," Barron said after a long pause, his voice breaking the silence, "people assume I have all the answers because of my last name. But I think all it really gave me was insulation. I don't even know what real struggle looks like." There was no shame in his words, no defensive posturing, just the kind of reluctant clarity that comes when a person sees the world for what it really is for the first time. Angelina crossed her arms tightly for a moment before letting them fall to her sides, sensing the shift in him. "Privilege is a hard thing to recognize when it's all you've ever known," she said. "But the fact that you're questioning it means you've already cracked a wall most people never even touch." Barron nodded slowly, his gaze now fixed on the horizon, lost in thought. "I used to think being American meant being free," he said softly. "Having choices, security, a future. But lately I wonder what if it just means access? And if so, then whose?" Angelina turned to face him, her expression sharpening, as if she could feel the weight of his question pressing against her own understanding of the world. "It's a fair question," she said after a moment. "In refugee camps, I've met people who worship this country from a distance, believing it's a golden door just waiting to be opened. But when they get here, they often find it locked, and worse, that someone's standing behind it, pretending the key never existed." Her words cut deeper than any of the lavish speeches inside the gala ever could. Not because they were angry, but because they were true. Barron's brow furrowed, his thoughts swirling. "I've seen the border from a car window," he said, his voice thick with the weight of truth. "I've heard policy arguments at dinner tables where no one in the room had ever missed a meal. And still, they spoke with such certainty, like they understood desperation." He paused, then looked her directly in the eye. "Do you think I can ever truly understand it? Or is empathy just another performance when it comes from someone like me?" Angelina didn't answer immediately. She stared at him, her gaze piercing, as though trying to determine if he truly understood the gravity of what he was asking. "Empathy isn't performance unless it ends at awareness," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "But if it pushes you to act, to listen, to change something not just for you, but for someone else, then it's real. Even if you started at the top." Barron exhaled, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy cloak. "My father used to talk about immigrants in numbers," he said, his voice low. "Charts, statistics, votes. I never heard him say the word soul." "Your father played a different game," Angelina said carefully, "but that doesn't mean you have to follow his rules." Barron looked at her then, deeply, truly seeing her for the first time. "I don't want to play any game," he said softly. "I just want to know who I am when the cameras are off. And if this country, the one I was born into, has room for someone trying to reinvent what his last name stands for." Angelina tilted her head slightly, a faint smile on her lips. "Maybe you're not trying to reinvent anything," she said. "Maybe you're just trying to become someone your future kids would be proud of. And that's more American than any flag ever stitched." Barron's eyes flickered down for a moment, then back up, a thought crossing his mind that he didn't share aloud. "You know, I thought I came out here tonight to escape the noise," he admitted. "But maybe I came to find out if I could be more than just a name in a suit." Angelina stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper now. "Then start by listening to the people whose stories were never written in gold ink," she said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. "That's where the truth lives. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it." The moment stretched between them, not romantic, not political, but profoundly human. And in the quiet of that October night, Barron Trump, the boy raised in marble towers and headlines, took one small step toward understanding what it meant to live in a country whose dream had never been handed out evenly. Barron realized that perhaps the most powerful part of the American dream was not just the pursuit of success, but the fight for inclusivity, the commitment to lifting others, and the acknowledgement that the dream is far from perfect, but always worth striving for. It wasn't the end of his journey, it was just the beginning. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.